Welcome back to the BAT podcast. Howard and Alex here for what may be our last episode of the year. Alex, how are you?
I'm doing well, man. It's good to see you from across the country. Looks like you're up in Hearst Tower, New York. How are things over there right now?
It's going well. I don't love this time of year when the sun goes down just after 4 p.m., but the city life makes up for it a bit. But last one of the year, and what a year it's been. I mean, you were telling me some stats before we started recording, but I think we did something like 20,000 auctions this year. Some of which were our most popular of all time, going back 6-7 years. What can you tell us about kind of the year in review?
Yeah, over 20,000 auctions, which is mind blowing to me, considering we've done about 62,000 in what, seven and a half years. We've done 60,000. Basically a third of those in the last 12 months is crazy to me. I've been here for 5.5 years and I started at lot like 1,400. So I've been around for 61,000 listings or something like that, which is just crazy to contemplate. We've been charging so hard this year. I don't know how it's felt for you, Howard, but sometimes it's hard for me to like take in these milestones. So I'm really having one of those moments where it's kind of all catching up to me here as we take stock at the end of the year.
Yeah, no, when you're in the trenches, I agree. It can be hard to look back and see what you've done. I mean, it's crazy in any, growing business, and for any of the listeners, whatever your kind of craft or careers are, to look back, right? And now in, one quarter, we list more auctions than we did in the first 3 years. And it's just crazy to kind of look back and do the math and see what it felt like then versus what it feels like today. Obviously you can't do it without building a great team, and it's the people that make it all happen. But for those of us that have been here since the early days of auctions, it's crazy, man. So I think maybe we'll plan, maybe the first ep of 2022 will be maybe a more in-depth review of 2021 and some of the awesome and crazy stuff that we've done.
For sure. I mean, we'll be doing the awards then. We can talk about those a little bit. Best auction of the year, best photo gallery of the year, all that kind of stuff. Best commenter award. That's always a popular one. So maybe we can do that and review a little bit. I will say, just kind of reminisce. Now you got me reminiscing a little bit, thinking about you and Zach and Randy and I sitting in that room, 5+ years ago. The anecdote I always think about is Randy being so excited after I'd been on the job for a few months of us getting to 40 auctions a week. That was when I think we started adding Friday auctions. We had 3 days, then 4 days, and then we went to Friday, 40 a week. I remember him being so pumped up, and now we do double that many every day. It's wild. And to your point, of course, it's the team that makes it all possible. But it does. It's been a journey. I looked like a much younger man 5 years ago, Howard.
Oh man, I remember in the first year we would, we started auctions only on Wednesdays, then we did Tuesdays and Thursdays, then Mondays, then Fridays. And for the first few months, I guess the number of auctions we did each week was notable, and we do weekly site post of now we're at 5 a week, now we're at 10 a week, now we're at 12 a week. And I remember we went to 15 a week, and Randy, being the hard charger that he is, kind of posted this 15 a week, which at the time was we're doing like 12 a week. And
you were solo. Were you solo crew? You were the entire auction staff, right?
It was a solo crew. And so I remember I was kind of pissed when I read this site post, and looking back, it seems so ridiculous, right? But I said, Randy, what are you doing, man? We didn't talk about 15 a week, and now you published it. Now we got to do it. And it's just hilarious to me to take that trip down memory lane and think about the output and like I said, how it felt then versus what we're doing now. But I remember that I was all miffed at 15 a week. You didn't even call me, didn't text me, but sure enough, we were able to deliver on the 15 a week, and then on from there.
Man, that's crazy. We saw 550. I think we got up to about 550 a week this year, which is crazy, and we're gonna eclipse that next year. So one of the things I was thinking about in retrospect for this year was, we've had, I think 4 of our 10 most popular listings of all time were in this year, including that Capistrano trailer that everyone got so fired up about. That's our most popular of all time. That restored kind of Art Deco trailer, but also a couple of interesting JDM cars, a 22B Subaru, and also a midnight purple Skyline R34, both here under show or display rules. But those were some of the most popular this year. What do you remember from the early days being like the big highlights from when you were solo crew? Do you remember what auctions like generated a lot of interest back in the day? Similar or different than 7 years later?
Yeah, I mean, in the first few months, it was just like, wow, there's, you know, I just remember it be like every bid was a big deal, right? When you only have 5 auctions and you know, a growing bidder base, which was, you know, many magnitudes lower than it is today. You know, every bid coming, every bid shine, we would be, you know, eating our sandwiches in the old office and literally watching, you know, every bid of every auction close, and there was only 10 auctions, right? So it didn't take that long, but yeah, certainly in the early days, you know, the bigger cars, you know, if we sold $100,000 car, that was a big deal. I remember our first, maybe the most notable that stands out to me, we sold a kind of a Porsche Speedster project for I think 300 grand, and I think at the time that was maybe our most expensive car we had ever sold. And
the red one, I remember
yeah.
watching that as a fan of BAT before I worked there. I remember that car very well. That was a big deal. People were excited.
Yeah, so you remember those kind of seminal moments, and then right now we've listed, you know, 50 speedsters, and you know, not that it's no longer a big deal, but certainly any firsts, you know, stand out to me. Man, so I was yeah, here in New York. I got invited this past week to attend a lunch here in the city, which was put on by the Madison Avenue Sports Car Club, kind of colloquially known as the Chowder Society. East Coast listeners may be familiar with that. It's a cool group. They've been around since 1957. So it's kind of this really old school, long-standing East Coast group that just has a great attitude. This was kind of their, I think they, in non-COVID times, get together every month for lunch at an old time place called Sardi's in New York. Both New York and Seinfeld listeners, Sardi's is something that comes up. But anyways, this was their kind of annual holiday lunch. I got invited by a BAT member and friend of mine, and was thankful to attend. It was pretty cool, Alex. There was a lot of kind of really awesome East Coast car people there. Skip Barber was there. He is very alive and well. They had Ed Wilburn, the previous head of global design for General Motors.
Oh, wow.
So he had the job that Harley Earl and Bill Mitchell had, albeit many, many decades later. So he's, you know, a super impressive guy. He said a few words, and it was cool to hear him speak.
Yeah, as a West Coaster, when I imagine kind of East Coast sports car clubs that go back to the 50s, I picture, you know, old time SCCA guys who are, you know, maybe driving their Allards or their you know, MGTCs or something, you know, and hanging out in kind of Tony old world overstuffed banquet restaurants in Manhattan. And I hope that there was a little bit of that vibe still left around. It has that feel to it.
Yeah, definitely. And this Chowder Society group, I mean, you know, back in the day, it was people like Luigi Canetti and Max Hoffman, and you know, I think one of the founding members was Walter Cronkite, the TV anchor who some people don't realize was a huge sports car fan, and actually drove a Sprite or a Healy in Sebring in 57 or 58.
Could maybe was he even Crosley racing a Crosley, or maybe it was a Sprite, maybe a little bit.
I mean, he raced a bunch of stuff, so it's quite possible he was running Crosleys too. Kind of the unofficial kind of featured guest was Bill Warner, who's a great guy, kind of all around motoring impresario, and the founder and chairman of the Amelia Island Concours. So he got up and was doing, they had a number of people get up, and it's just very tongue in cheek, people doing kind of roasts and skits and all sorts
of. There's a little stage, and people are giving each other shit.
Yeah, all sorts of funny stuff like that. But they had like a little mini Q&A with Warner, and someone asked him about, you know, his favorite racing or car memory. and and I had forgotten about this. He said he had run a 1990 Firebird at the Daytona Classic 2 or 3 years ago. And it was a car he bought on Bring a Trailer with a group of friends of his that were going to go run Daytona. And he finished second in class. He bought this thing on BAT for 15 grand. And he was running with, Porsches and prototypes and 2-frame race cars. We'll post it in the link to this podcast, but he sent us a kind of a success story and photos of him at Daytona, the car on track, and him running around and giving the big boys a run for their money in what wasn't necessarily the fastest car, but was certainly the cheapest car. And he told that story to the group, and so I went up to him afterward, and we had a good laugh.
That's awesome, man. That's a cool event too. I think running events like that in kind of pedestrian or a little bit more pedestrian cars seems like it would be an awful lot of fun. Do you know much about that event? Do they run it? Do they run a full kind of enduro length for it?
I've never been to it, but I believe it runs for most of the day and night, and I think they do hour races. So it's not one group running 24 hours, but of course, they have like any vintage event. They have 9, 10, or 11 classes, and they get races, but they schedule them. I mean, I think there's a race that the green flag drops at midnight. So it was pretty good. What did he say in his success story? We were certainly not the fastest nor the slowest, but defiantly the cheapest. And they had a little bumper sticker on the car for the event that read, "My car costs less than your tires," which is probably true.
That's awesome.
So that was pretty good.
Awesome. I've been all fired up on endurance racing again recently. I watched the after so many suggestions, I finally got around to watching the Netflix Formula One show, which is really amazing. Drive to Survive. Ripped through it, really enjoyed it. Even my wife liked it, which, I mean, she couldn't care less about cars, and she really enjoyed it because it's just so well done. And then I recently, like Formula One is interesting to me, but I'm a sports car guy through and through. And I recently stumbled across, I don't know if you know about this, Howard, on YouTube, there's a 3 or 4 season long series about Michael Fassbender, the actor, racing Porsche endurance cars. He drives I think it's an RSR. It's the 911 that's like mid-engine. And he's on doing like European Le Mans series. And it's really well done. I think it's actually produced by Porsche. They're like 15-minute episodes. You can watch them on YouTube. And he's been for years kind of working up to speed doing European endurance racing. And his whole goal is to race at Le Mans. And it's really, really entertaining and done in kind of a similar style to that Formula One show, but you can watch it for free on YouTube. And it was really awesome and kind of got me all jazzed up again about driver changes and, long-term endurance strategy.
So are you binging Drive to Survive? Is that your plan this weekend?
Watch the whole thing, and now the Fassbender show. Now I'm hungry for another good high budget racing reality show. I don't know if there's another one out there, but
yeah, interestingly, there was a lot of racers at this thing, and they the conversation at this lunch kind of turned to the current F1 controversy and people's thoughts on the Verstappen Hamilton race and what transpired in the final laps of Abu Dhabi. So I'm sure our listeners are many of them are F1 fans and have an opinion on that. But no, it got pretty deep. They had Judy Stropis coming up and the lady that ran the all-female team at the Indy 500 a few years ago is there. So they brought her up, and as kind of a pro racing expert who is super familiar with all the ins and outs of what race control was calling minute by minute, and it was pretty neat.
Sounds like you got some legit bench racing in there, which sounds good. That's my favorite kind. It's easier. I enjoy more talking and thinking about racing. It's been a long time since I've actually been in a race car, and if I search through my memories, I think actually doing it ends up being a little bit tougher and more stressful than thinking about it and watching it on TV. So maybe that's the best way to experience it. In the what was the name of the restaurant?
Well, it's typically at Sardi's, which is not open yet. So they added a place called a steakhouse called Smith and Walensky.
Okay, well,
Which
I
is
hope
more
it
for
was, I
extended
hope
family.
it still felt properly old world with waiters and bow ties and all that.
Certainly, oh, yeah, absolutely. So we got a few cool cars on the site, Alex, that I wanted to talk to you about. Man, I mean, we've talked about how the car market is definitely strong. We had some two really standout results for special late model sports cars. One was that 2011 GT3 RS 4-liter, which had 2,000 miles, was a white car that sold for 675,000, which I thought was a really headline result. Super special car. They don't come to market that often, but that was definitely something that caught my eye. And also a white car a few years later, a 458 Speciale. We actually launched a yellow one that went live today. So I'm interested to see how that one does. But a white 458 Speciale did 600 grand. So two super special cars, right? And it's no wonder that they're commanding big prices, but those definitely stood out to me.
And kind of similar things, right? Like the ultimate evolution of their chassis in both cases. I know that a lot of people say that the 4-liter 997 GT3 is like, that's the one, that's the GT3. I have probably, goes without saying, have never driven one or even been close to one. I don't think I've ever even seen one in person. But a colleague of ours did have a 997.2 GT3 that was amazing to drive and was a wild car. So I can only imagine what more power and a little bit more displacement feels like in that kind of car. Still a manual transmission there. 458 Speciale is not, presumably. I would imagine it's paddle shift of some kind.
Yeah, correct.
Which one gets you more excited, Howard?
Probably the Porsche for me. Though, I'd be very happy with just a plain Jane GT3. I always love the 07, 08 GT3 RSs, mostly because I like the orange or green.
Yeah.
No wonder those also are on a big upswing. Makes a lot of sense in hindsight. But yeah, that'd probably be my pick for late model 911.
Yeah, I kind of feel the same way. I like I like the idea of a little bit more of an analog simple car, although I'm sure the 458 is a delight to drive. I feel like I've read that many times in magazines, but yeah, the 997 GT3 is really an amazing car. Another, if you don't mind me going, mentioning one other car that's kind of in the upper price range that I was really excited about, Howard. It was the ended that same day as the GT3 4.0. Was a low mileage 89 911 turbo cabriolet in a very unique beige color. Did you see
apricot, the apricot car?
Totally.
Yeah.
Low mile 89, of course, the only year that a 5-speed came in the 930, and a cabriolet to boot. And then this, yeah, was it called apricot? It looked like kind of like a palomino or a beige color to me, with color matched wheels and then like a tobacco interior. Almost like a 60s or a 70s color combo, but in a 5-speed 930 cabriolet. I really, really like that car. Sold for around 200 grand, I think. Although it was no reserve auction. I thought that was another cool result on a really unique car. Probably not ever going to find another car quite like that one.
Yeah, the color is called apricot beige. Honestly, this actually came through our white glove department, I believe, and so I had an advanced look at it, and I was not even aware this color existed. And I'm sure that at least some of the community shared that mystery as me. But yeah, certainly, I mean, the 89 Turbo Cab is a special car in and of itself. But the color on this one is definitely quite a notable option.
Yeah, I'm way into it. I don't know if you remember this, but a couple of years ago, when we had that barbecue at Monterey during Car Week, at God, what was that facility called? Steve Cottrell worked there, and I think it was Lauber's place. You
Yep.
Remember that event?
Yep.
There was a 930 coupe there in a palomino color, like really similar color combination, but a coupe, and that I still think about that car all the time. And this is the closest thing I've ever seen come up for sale. Normally I'm not a Cabriolet guy, but I feel like this one is undeniable.
Probably the most outrageous car we have on the site, which is just an insane vehicle in its own right, is the G63 6x6. Would encourage people to check that out. We've listed, I think, one or two of these before. This particular one has the Brabus package, but this is that 3-axle, 6-wheeled contraption that is made in Austria by Steyr. They made 100 or so of them. But this thing is just one of the wackiest, late model cars ever produced. I get it. I sort of get it. I sort of don't. But that's not the point. This is a car that is only able to be here under a show or display exemption. And we can chat a little bit about show or display. We are fortunate to have a direct line and relationship with NHTSA, who kind of governs the show or display rules, and who are cool people who are huge car enthusiasts there, active followers of Bring a Trailer. And I think our relationship with them, Alex, was brought about by the first 6x6 we listed, and they reached out, just making sure we were kind of crossing our T's and dotting our I's with how we go about listing cars that can only be here under show or display. I know you chat with them sometimes, just shooting the breeze, not even business related. They're your buddies, huh?
Yeah, we've got a great relationship with them, and they've been really awesome to work with. I will say, when you first hear from them, when you're listing a show or display vehicle, it's like a little bit like, oh my God, here comes the DOT. NHTSA is a department, the National Highway Transportation Safety Administration is obviously a subset of the Department of Transportation. So hearing from them that first time led to some internal panic, but they actually just wanted folks who were bidding on that first 6x6 we had to be clear that they would have to apply for their own show or display exemption for the truck before they completed the purchase. And so that first contact we had with them has led to us really kind of being able to dive into what show or display is. I always thought it was called show and display. It's actually show or display. And this is for an exemption. One of the ways you can have a car in the United States before it is 25 years old and exempt for importation rules. It's one of the ways you can have them here before the vehicle is 25 years old, even though it was not built for the US market and doesn't conform necessarily to all of our safety regulations. So you have to have an importer convert it so that it can pass EPA regulations, and you have to have it imported officially. You get an exemption letter from NHTSA, which the previous owner of both 6x6s did. And then we put a disclaimer on any car that is being auctioned on Bring a Trailer under the show or display rules, stating kind of all the things that the DOT wants people to know before they purchase the car. The big one being, if you're a new owner, you've got to get your own show or display exemption. You have to actually do it before you complete the transaction. So they want to know that the vehicle is being sold for obvious reasons. But other than that, it's gone pretty smoothly. The seller of the 6x6 got a show or display exemption, and the new owner will do the same. And I think I mentioned earlier in the podcast, the two of those really popular JDM imports we had this year, that 22B Impreza and the Midnight Purple Skyline R34, both were also here and under show or display. And Howard adds value, right? I mean, you get to be one of the only kids on the block with a car, that may be more common elsewhere, but when you've got it here under show or display, which also limits number of miles you can drive it. I think it's 2,500 miles a year, but there's an added value there through the kind of exclusivity of having one of those cars here, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. I think the origins of that exemption go back to the Porsche 959 and Bill Gates and Paul Allen being car enthusiasts and having a great interest in some of these supercars that weren't produced in the U.S. and kind of lobbying the government and the DOT to make an exception, which they were successful in doing. But yeah, R34 Skylines. What do we have, Alex? We had that CLK DTM AMG, right?
Yes.
That was a show display car.
Yep.
We
had a couple of Zagato bodied Astons. I think we had a couple of those that were not sold here in the United States.
Yeah. Jag XJ220, which is now 25 years old, which would make it not needed for the show display status. But anyways, we've had a number of these now, and we've had really so now we have a kind of a great process and language that NHTSA has approved and that we work with them on. And yeah, they were telling you guys, but they're following along in the comments, and I mean, and primarily because they have a great interest in the stuff we list, and they think cars are cool, but you know, their day job is obviously monitoring some of that stuff. And what I think their primary concern is what, Alex? Cars coming in from Canada specifically that are not legal,
Yeah.
or what have they told you?
Yeah, they've said that the main thing they're kind of concerned about is importation from Canada, cars coming across the border. Obviously, a lot of similarities between Canadian motor vehicle standards and American motor vehicle standards, and so cars kind of coming across the border, looking like they would be legal in the United States, but not being legal here, and some maybe fly-by-night importers who are not filling out paperwork properly, or not even really, you know, kind of doing any of the things they're supposed to do. Again, like I said, you're supposed to, when you bring a car in that's not 25 years old, you have to have a registered importer do it, somebody who's registered with the DOT, and you also need, you know, to make sure that that car will comply with all of the American emission standards and crash standards, which oftentimes, and we've seen this quite a few times on BAT too, involves getting a letter straight from the manufacturer, right? If you want to bring a car in, remember you, Howard, and I were dealing with that GTV, that second generation GTV Alpha, the 4 headlight car, the front wheel drive car, with that seller who I think you knew, and he had to get a letter from Alfa Romeo in Italy to say, like, yes, this car meets American crash standards in order to like have it be here before it was 25 years old. So yeah, they're primarily concerned about cars kind of being brought in around those rules, or importers saying that the car meets requirements when it doesn't. And so we are really careful about that at Bring a Trailer. We don't have any interest in, you know, selling cars that are shady or kind of were brought in under improper circumstances. That doesn't benefit us, and it certainly doesn't benefit people utilizing our marketplace. We don't want to pass along a car to a buyer on our website if that buyer is going to have problems getting the car titled or have problems with the government. That doesn't benefit anyone.
So, no, look, and you know, on a platform like Bring a Trailer with such a huge audience and exposure, and when you're selling these types of cars, I mean, you have to do it the right way. And the NHTSA men and women have been a pleasure to work with, but you don't really have a choice. I mean, if you want to do this stuff in today's day and age, you know, you need to do it the right way. And I think it's hugely valuable to us and to you know, prospective bidders on the car that we're doing it the right way, and that, you know, we're getting the letter and all that. You know, the G63 is a late model car, right? 2014. I think G&K Automotive is kind of the leading conversion shop that federalizes those. But you mentioned that 90s GTV. I mean, a lot of these shops, right, for cars that were federalized 30 years ago, like a number of them, you know, aren't in business anymore, right? They folded up in the 90s or 2000s. So for some cars needing to, you know, for example, contact or get a letter from the original conversion shop, that ain't possible in a number of cases. Yeah. So it can complicate matters for some of the older stuff. But for something like a 6x6 or these later model cars, you know, the outfits are still around.
From what I understand, it was quite a bit more Wild West during the gray market era. I used to work on a couple of gray market Porsches that were brought in the 80s, and we certainly sell lots of cars that came in during that era. It's just, to the best of my understanding, it's not exactly clear when that ended, but around 1990 is when kind of gray market era ends. And I actually love seeing 80s cars, often European cars, Mercedes, BMWs, Porsches, with those period import plates there in the door jamb down next to the manufacturer plate. Says who federalized it, who made it so that it could pass smog. And then seeing those old, we love when there's the kind of documentation to back it up as well. You see those old letters from the EPA in 1984, you know, to the owner that brought it in and saying, hey, your car passes smog now, you're all good to go. I think that kind of stuff is cool. It doesn't matter now that the cars are 35, even 40 years old, but it's really cool to see. And it's just a kind of a cool to me adds kind of interesting historical value to a car that came in, in that period.
No, I had a 84 Renault R5 Turbo 2 with a great history file that included all of that. The Sun Industries, for people listening who remember then, who did a lot of the R5 Turbo federalization, the EPA docs, right? The 14-day one-way permit, so the guy could drive it, from one deal to another to get everything he needed for the final approval. Those docs are harder and harder to find on the older cars, but some savvy owners have kept those docs in place, and I thought it was neat to thumb through it. The other interesting thing that surfaced in the comments on the 6x6 was it was previously owned by Dan Bilzerian, who's kind of an Instagram hero and former professional poker player who lives a wild and crazy life. And one of his interests is cars. He did a deal with that movie producer, Tom Goldstein. Some may remember they drag raced a 458 versus Dan's CSX continuation Cobra. So he's done some wacky car stuff, but how many, there's only so many white 6x6 Brabus cars around. So if you were a high profile owner of one, it's probably not hard to trace it back, but
I don't know that guy as well as you do, Howard, but you've showed me some of his posts. It seems like the white Brabus 6x6 is like a perfect encapsulation of his lifestyle. Fits right in. Seems like it would.
Yeah. So people are surfacing all sorts of funny stuff, but yeah, let's see, that auction ends in 7 days. Bids at $1 million, probably the most outrageous thing you can buy on 4 or 6 wheels. So we'll be interested to see where that ends up.
Another one that I was kind of blown away by, speaking of kind of big numbers and cars that blew my mind, Howard, was that green low mile Murcielago 6-speed that sold, I think, a couple of weeks ago. Car went crazy. It sold for over 500 grand, I think, which kind of blew my mind. Although I kept coming back to the listing because it's such a good looking car, especially when they have their kind of wings in. They're really clean, which is not something you always, not a word you always use to describe Lamborghini styling. Really pretty car, manual transmission, a pretty rare color. I don't know if you noticed that one or not, but that result kind of blew my mind, and I really like that car as well.
Yeah, and incidentally, we now have another 6-speed Murcielago live that's no reserve, so we'll see what that one does. But yeah, this is one of those cars, man. Right? This was 3-4 years ago. This was kind of just a used exotic car, but it was in a great color. What do they call it? Verde Ithaca, I think. A lot of the Murcielagos were E-gear, automatic or E-gear, I guess they called it. So yeah, just I think one of these cars that people are kind of rediscovering. This was a great spec and a great color, and brought an impressive result. But it's a lot of those kind of early mid 2000s, kind of last of the analog versions of a lot of these cars that are really capturing people's attention.
It's like what we were talking about with that GT3 4-liter, which manual transmission still. I think the 991 GT3, as I recall, goes to a paddle gearbox as well. So if you want the last of the era, and I think, correct me if I'm wrong, Howard, but I think that's the same V12 that goes all the way back to the Miura. I think that's got its roots all the way back. So in some ways, it's kind of got lineage going back to the first Lamborghinis, which is cool. I guess all the way back to the 350 GT. I think it's the same engine all the way through.
Could be. It might be a stretch. Lineage and roots. I'll get on board with that.
Not like it's running Weber carburetors in the Murcielago.
Anything else, Alex? Sorry, what else you got?
Oh, I was going to ask you if there's anything else that got you excited recently. I love talking about some of these results.
Oh man. Well, yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't mention the Cord L29 that we had that sold. That was a few weeks back now. Maybe me and Alex is certainly in our top 3 of favorite pre-war cars. So I was proud to see that one go.
I love that. Any big pre-war result gets me excited. We actually have I don't know if you know this, Howard, we added a pre-war category. So you can actually search our website by pre-war now. You can just see all the not only the pre-war cars that are live, but also the results as well, which is pretty awesome.
I did see that. We roll out new model pages every month. It's amazing. We've done hundreds of them, and we have many hundreds more to go. But yeah, model pages are a great way to organize data and have really rich and organized information all in one easy to find place. And we do it both for specific models, but also more for broader categories like pre-war and motorcycles and stuff like that.
Yep. Yes, indeed. Hot rods. We just added military vehicles. Did that. That was a little Veterans Day, a little Armistice Day, Veterans Day treat was to add the military vehicles category. Lots of good military vehicles on BAT, which is another one that gets me excited.
Very good, Alex. Well, this has been, what have we done? 37-ish episodes this year. We got some stuff in the works to try to make the BAT podcast better in 2022. So if we don't see you all this year, we will be back the first week of January.
Thanks for having me, Howard. This was fun.
Thanks for everyone for listening to us this year, and email us with your holiday wishes and good cheer. We're loving your questions that are coming through every week, and see you all in the new year.